Hello and welcome to the webcast from the conference board. Very delighted you can join us today to focus on a very fascinating topic, looking at the governance implications of blockchain. And so we're delighted you can join us and looking forward to the next hour or so where we can explore this topic and hopefully give you some real insights on exactly what's going on around blockchain, and in particular how it's being used around business and the governance issues that are connected to that. But before I do that, just a couple of housekeeping matters that we need to deal with. The first of which is just how do we participate in this webcast. And we really would welcome some questions from you as we go along. Let's make the most out of this opportunity. So to ask questions, just type those in the chat box on the bottom left, and we will come to those and weave them into the conversation as we go along, make the most of this. We'll also have an opportunity as we go along, but particularly at the end in terms of a Q&A session. So please do put your questions there. The presentation is free to download. So again, that's just look at the file download to do that. You can use full screen to see just the PowerPoint. If you don't want to see the video bit, that's there. Without evaluations, where we would be. So I would encourage you to do the evaluation. I know that everything nowadays is evaluated, but it really helps us in terms of understanding the topics that we're dealing with and how useful you found today in terms of time spent exploring hopefully a very useful topic. And talking about useful topics, if you do find it useful or you want to share this actually with some colleagues that you're dealing with an issue around blockchain or other technologies in terms of governance, then you can share this particular webcast as a video after we finish today. So please do that as well. Now, if you're joining us for looking for CPE credits, that you're doing those and you're looking to add those up, you can get them from here. Please look out for making sure that you type your full name and email address. Also, click OK on the pop-ups. And you have to stay online for the entire webcast. So make sure that you do that, and you only get the credits for the full webcast and being live on today. So thank you for your attention on those housekeeping matters. Let's move on to the real business of the webcast today. And what I'd like to do now is move just to introduce our guest speaker. So we're delighted today to have Ben Dubois. Ben, would you like to just introduce yourself briefly to everybody on the webcast?
Yes. Hi, everyone. I'm from Switzerland. So I'm Ben Dubois. I'm part of corporate operation based in Vevey, in the corporate operation of the group Nestlé. And I'm blockchain lead and digital transformation manager, which means that I'm trying to match the business needs that we see up and coming with emerging technology, and to leverage that for the benefit of the group and our consumers and customers. So over to you, Chris.
Well, thank you again, Ben, for joining us today. It's a real privilege, and we'll be turning to Ben shortly after I do a kind of brief introduction about the topic and some of the issues, and then what we'll do is I'll hand over to Ben to talk about the actual kind of how do we put this into practice and how Nestlé dealing with some of these issues, which are real live issues today, and how do we go about this. So our title today is basically a bot on the board, and what we're talking about here is how do companies deal with digital disruption. We all hear about it. It might sound a little crazy about having a bot on the board, but what we're really looking at here is how important is digital? How do we deal with it? How do we govern it? How is it changing our business model? And how do we make the most out of that today in terms of a business? There isn't a business in the world, I don't think, that isn't being affected by digital disruption. So it's a kind of something that is not an if, but it really is how to deal with this issue. And that's what we want to really try and focus on today. Now, rather than boiling the whole ocean and looking at all digital technologies, what we're doing today is taking a slice of that and looking at one particular technology in terms of blockchain and what's happening in terms of how it's influencing businesses and changing some of the processes, and in particular, obviously, about the governance model that goes with that. Both from the day-to-day operations right through to the more strategic issues in terms of what's happening around governance and the business model for the future. So that's really our kind of topic and what we want to focus on. As you see here, I've got kind of three kind of questions really. As I already said, there isn't a traditional business sector that isn't facing disruption and the threat of disruption from these digital technologies. So how do we cope with this? The second would be a big question is really how do we kind of grasp the situation and look at the kind of fundamentals, and if we kind of make the right choices. And one of the things is about digital is that you have to continuously kind of try, to a degree fail, and re-implement, but much quicker in terms of a sprint thinking rather than a longer term strategic planning and business process. And I think the final bit to look at is one of the biggest barriers is basically how do you connect to the board? Do they really understand these issues? How do you frame them? What are some of the issues about explaining something that's very complex and technical to a board member who really might not understand that, in order that you get the governance of these processes right? So that's the third issue on a very fast-moving digital disruption. If we could sum that up, probably recent survey said that 95% of board directors thought that digital was going to change their business model. That's not surprising. What is surprising is in a similar survey, around a third of board directors felt that they were able to deal with understanding digital technologies and therefore translate that into their role as board directors. So 2/3 of board directors are not feeling very comfortable with this. So we can see the importance of the governance issue around these new technologies. So the next thing to look at is that when we often talk about digital technologies, people are looking and have very, very different ideas and understandings of which technologies are we talking about. How do we categorize digital technologies? So what we've done on the slide here is look at what I call the big six, six digital technologies that are really shaping business. I'm sure you've heard of all of them, but it's a useful concept on this slide just to show how we pull them all together. I'm sure you're very familiar with many of these. AI, artificial intelligence, of course, the Internet of Things, which obviously connects together over the internet through sensors, lots of moving parts, be they cars or pieces on the supply chain. Big data and analytics is the third one. Digital and social media is obviously revolutionizing the world, not only for companies, but for people as well. And then we've got robotics and advanced material science, which are also changing the manufacturing process for many companies around the world. And the final one is the one that we'll focus on today, which is blockchain. And blockchain really has had a lot of hype around it. And one of the reasons for holding the webcast today is really to try and cut through some of that hype and try and understand how blockchain technologies have been deployed. Some people call these distributed ledger technologies, DL technologies, and some blockchain. The way that we define them here more is that blockchain spans more than one entity. Distributed ledger typically is used by one organization, but they're kind of interchangeable at the present time. I think the more important question is how are they being used, and that's something that Ben will talk to in a very short while. The final piece of the jigsaw is really around 5G. We've heard a lot about that, which really kind of gives broadband speeds anywhere through the application of 5G around almost around the planet. These are actually put into place with very, very high capacity, shorter kind of antennae and base stations, which give you almost broadband level speeds, up to 100 times quicker than 4G. So something that can revolutionize. There's some really behind the glue that brings a lot of these digital technologies together. So things, as we know, are moving pretty quickly. But I suppose one myth that we need to dispel is that typically that we think about, particularly the organizations that come from Silicon Valley, when we talk about the Googles, the Facebooks, the Microsofts, and the Amazons, that they are way ahead in terms of technology. Interesting slide here, which is actually from Deloitte, which looks at M&A, and we can see for the first time in 2017 that traditional non-tech companies spent more on technology in terms of M&A deals, i.e. acquiring technology and the companies that are providing it, than those actually from Silicon Valley, the tech companies. So we are seeing a big shift. Traditional businesses now digitizing itself and really kind of competing with those digital businesses from Silicon Valley. So it's not just about tech anymore, it's about all business being very much digital. So what I would like to do now is just switch to blockchain in a little bit more detail and have a look at a video which explains a little bit about blockchain in order to get everybody on the same level, and then we can move forward. Could you play the video?
When you vote, have you ever wondered whether your ballot is actually counted? If you meet someone online, how do you know they're who they say they are? When you buy coffee that's labeled fair trade, what makes you so certain of its origin? To be sure, really sure, about any of those questions, you'd need a system where records could be stored, facts could be verified by anyone, and security is guaranteed. That way, no one could cheat the system by editing records, because everyone using the system would be watching. Systems like this are on the horizon, and the software that powers them is called a blockchain. Blockchains store information across a network of personal computers, making them not just decentralized, but distributed. This means no central company or person owns the system, yet everyone can use it and help run it. This is important because it means it's difficult for any one person to take down the network or corrupt it. The people who run the system use their computer to hold bundles of records submitted by others, known as blocks, in a chronological chain. The blockchain uses a form of math called cryptography to ensure that records can't be counterfeited or changed by anyone else. You've probably heard of the blockchain's first killer app, a form of digital cash called Bitcoin that you can send to anyone, even a complete stranger. Bitcoin is different from credit cards, PayPal, or other ways to send money because there isn't a bank or financial middleman involved. Instead, people from all over the world help move the digital money by validating others' Bitcoin transactions with their personal computers, earning a small fee in the process. Bitcoin uses the blockchain by tracking records of ownership over this digital cash, so only one person can be the owner at a time and the cash can't be spent twice, like counterfeit money in the physical world can. But Bitcoin is just the beginning for blockchains. In the future, blockchains that manage and verify online data could enable us to launch companies that are entirely run by algorithms, making self-driving cars safer, help us protect our online identities, and even track the billions of devices on the Internet of Things. These innovations will change our lives forever, and it's all just beginning. To learn more about the urgent future of the blockchain, please visit iftf.org/blockchainfutureslab.
So that's a useful video just in terms of leveling up on what blockchain is really about. And one of the big messages to take away from that is that we're not talking about Bitcoin today. You may be disappointed about that, but we're going to focus on the commercial applications that was mentioned there about the real, I think as the video puts it, we're at the very start of what the potential for blockchain is and how its application to real world business problems is actually taking place at the present time, and that's what we want to focus on. If we look at this particular quote here, I think, which is very good from Goldman Sachs, which is, it has the potential to change the way that we buy and sell, interact with government, and verify the authenticity of everything from property titles to organic vegetables. So we can see that it is all encompassing. And again, we don't want to boil the ocean around this, but as Goldman go on to say, it combines the openness of the internet with security of cryptography to give everyone a faster, safer, verified key information and establish trust. I think established trust is absolutely critical. So the kind of question is that this technology holds great potential. I think the real kind of question is, how do we kind of use it? And importantly, how do we kind of govern it within an organization? And that's what we want to turn to now. So just a couple of slides to finish off my introduction before I hand over to Ben, just a framework to think about the operational challenges in terms of that governance oversight, really. We see 5 here, which really are as follows. Risks. So do we know the technologies that are being deployed from a governance point of view? A little bit back to my big 6. Do we understand what they are and how they're being used in the organization? Secondly, and a very, very important question, particularly on AI, but also in other areas as well, including blockchain, what are the ethics of using this? What's happening in the code? What's happening in terms of the deployment of these particular technologies? And from a governance standpoint, do we understand what they are? And does this fit with the purpose of the organization? I think thirdly, in terms of compliance, both in terms of are we complying with those ethical sort of standards that we've set ourselves, but also can we use blockchain in terms of actually understanding our own compliance within the organization? Many global organizations are very, very diverse, and the ability to actually basically track what's going on, both in terms of supply chain, but also other activities, potentially gives another use for blockchain in terms of the way it might be used. The fourth is in terms of kind of capabilities. So do we have the kind of people who can both be experts in deploying this, a little bit like Ben, who's going to talk in a minute, and do we have the people at a governance level on the board and in executive management who really understand these technologies and can deploy them in a way that actually answers point 5, which is what are the opportunities around this? How can we transform the business model and give ourselves a competitive advantage in the future? What are the opportunities to ensure that the business is successful in the future? So I think that's one thing that we need to bear in mind in terms of when we're thinking about this. The second is just in terms of managing investors. So what are the expectations of investors? This is a real big topic at the moment. Work's going on at London Business School on this, and also at the OECD, which is looking at the way that blockchain can be deployed in terms of managing corporate governance and investors. If you think about it, it's potential that you can actually start to look at the share register of everybody through a blockchain again. So we really start to see the change in the way that the board operates, becoming much more proactive in terms of its operation, in terms of how it deals with things. So if there aren't any questions, if we have questions, do let us know. What I'll do now is I'll hand over to Ben now to talk after that introduction on blockchain and why it's important on the application of that within Nestlé. So Ben, thank you again for joining us. I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks for having me. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about what we're doing in blockchain at Nestlé. But first of all, I would like to start by the reason why we're looking at blockchain. As I said previously in the introduction, my job is about matching technology to business needs. What we've seen in the last 5 to 10 years is drastic change in consumers' behaviors and expectation from the food manufacturer and the food and beverage industry as a whole. And we see technology as supporting, helping the business to support this shift. The biggest shift are probably about, expecting more information about the origin of the product that the consumer are buying, expectation of buying sustainable products and being able to source them anywhere and anytime. And for the business and for Nestlé in particular, it means that we need to prepare for an unprecedented transparency for the consumer, both in terms of the impact, the environmental impact of the product they buy, but in terms of how we make the product and where they're coming from. It means as well a step change in decision-making speeds, almost going to an autonomous way to make decision for forecasting, for instance, and that can be only made possible if you have trusted information in almost real time you can rely on. And the third aspect is for the industry in particular, it means we have to change the approach and from being only trading partners, from being collaborators and co-innovate to serve the consumers better together. So this shift basically When we were looking at technology to match this and enable Nestle to provide this to consumers, we looked at various technology, large database, etc. But there was none that were sort of looked promising in terms of matching, especially the transparency expectation from consumers. But then in 2017, blockchain became a little bit more mature and starting venturing out of cryptocurrency into industry, into pharma, into banking. And we looked at blockchain and thought that it could be the technology that enabled us to reach that level of transparency for consumer. So what we wanted to do is to test the hypothesis that blockchain allows us to create a trusted conduct of information, end-to-end conduct of information from the farmers all the way to the retailers and ultimately to the consumers. And information we can trust, going beyond the traditional one-up, one-down information sharing that we have at the moment. And so we've chosen to explore blockchain further and test whether this technology could help us do that. Now, the problem with blockchain is that, as Chris said at the beginning, is very much hyped, and it's still very much hyped. It was in 2017, and it still is the case now. There's a lot of noise about what the technology could do, what is the potential, but not a lot of concrete application that have been industrialized. So we've chosen with our steering committee and with our decision makers to focus on certain use case around traceability and experiment in this field in order to start small and have an easy experiment to demonstrate what the technology can do and can't do as well, to create a pool in the business. So here you can see this quadrant is basically blockchain. The misconception is often that blockchain will bring you traceability. It's not the case. Blockchain would wrap traceability that is existing into trust and expand it beyond the traditional one-up, one-down, as I said. But you need to have a digitalized supply chain already for blockchain to be leveraged. So we've chosen, first of all, to focus on the green right-hand side, top right corner, which is where we knew there was a consumer pool, and we had already a fairly mature digitalized supply chain that we can leverage. We can leverage the existing data sources to connect them together to create this end-to-end information flow. And this was really the start of the work. Now we've expanded that afterwards to looking at how we can connect, increase the information coming from external sources, for instance, through blockchain, and digitalize our supply chain. But really, the start was the philosophy was start small and see if it works. And if it works in this easy case, then try the hard application, but start small. And to do that, we had as well to change the mindset in our companies, and I think it's the case in many companies, from large scale, deployment from scratch capex project, heavy investment. What we decided is to keep the investment at a bare minimum and have very small, quick experimentation to see which one we could industrialize. So we had to, with our stakeholders and Steerco and with our bosses, we had to change the expectation a little bit of what they could see in terms of time, that we would have to go fast and be agile, not being constrained by the time scale that the business would otherwise give us. That there had to be patience, because it wouldn't happen overnight. Value realization of the technology and seeing an impact on the top line and bottom line wouldn't happen tomorrow. It would take time because it's an immature technology, and we had to test the best use cases to deploy it at scale and then see the impact. The third one was about the two, supervision and governance, come together, and it's allowing freedom and allowing failure, which is a big change of mindset. That failure is good, and we can learn from our failure and pivot the experimentation that failed to again go into a different direction. And that it was a two-way street between our governing bodies and ourselves, because we were looking at technology that was, as I said, immature, not used in the industry, so knowledge was very limited. So it was a two-way street in terms of trying to educate the decision makers of what was possible, trying to help them decide as well, because they had and they still have a lot of external queries, and people wanted to sell products around blockchain because it's still a buzzword. So trying to coordinate that with them and coordinate the bottom-up sort of experimentation phase, because people in the markets, Nestle is a very decentralized company, and a lot of people in the market are experimenting on the side with various technology, different tech providers. And the problem with that is that you have this pocket of innovation and blockchain deployment, but they don't work together. So we had to have sort of coordination from the top to ensure that we have solutions that were compatible to create this network of information and this end-to-end pipeline of information in a sustainable way, and then measure how we were experimenting and what success looks like, rather than just looking at if you deploy an app or if you deploy a consumer-facing front end, not just the number of clicks you have, but trying to go beyond and go and meet the consumers to ask them about the technology and whether it answers their demands, because the technology is very misunderstood from the consumer point of view as well. So it's trying to work with the consumer to guide our thinking. Having done that, we sort of decided to focus on expand the application from purely consumer trust, which is the red box you have see, which was you can see on the slide, which was the original use case. And as we were working on this use case, talking to a subject matter expert, we realized that we can expand the application of blockchain to other fields in the company. So leverage blockchain for efficiency. So reduce cost in our operation through dematerialization and automation of process. For instance, when we do international trade, how we can make custom processes seamless and frictionless through blockchain, because custom officers would have data and documents from on the blockchain straight away without needing the physical paperwork, which is where we always and very often incur cost and delay, because the paperwork can be missing, can be late, or can be containing mistakes. So having blockchain to do that would allow us to go faster through custom, for instance. And then the third aspect, which is the one that is the sort of appear only recently, it's about leveraging blockchain as an instrument for good, and to reach farmers, for instance, and connect consumers and farmers, for consumers to understand what we do in terms of community development, but as well to be able to track sustainability and environmental impact of our product through a solution like this. So, for instance, CO2 emission, greenhouse gas emission in our supply chain, and be able to collect that in a trusted and transparent way, and a fast way as well. So you can see that the applications are very wide, and we decided, in order to coordinate that, to have a small core team. So one person from corporate operation and one person from IT to manage this portfolio of experiments, interacting with the stakeholders that were in charge of each of these three pillars, and the governance being from supply chain and our head of operation to give top-down direction, where they felt that we should look into to deploy blockchain, but to coordinate bottom-up experimentation and what was coming from people that were on the field, on the ground, talking to consumers or talking to our suppliers and seeing how we can coordinate and match the two requirements from the top and from the bottom. What we have done is that, what we've seen as takeaway working on blockchain over the last 18 months is that although we started with one use case, as we were reviewing with our steerco the potential application regularly, we find other applications that can be as powerful as the consumer trust aspect. As I mentioned, the blockchain for sustainability or blockchain for good, blockchain for efficiency in our operation, and the governance allowed us to sort of pivot some of the experimentation in this field in order to guide the investment, but to keep the investment always small until proven, until a business case was, we were able to demonstrate a business case for deployment. But one of the key and the main lesson learned was to master the bottom-up approach, because there are so many experiments happening in the market, and we're still not 100%. If you ask me now how many blockchain experiments there are ongoing in Nestle, I would not be able to tell you with 100% certainty how many there are. But we had to do a lot of communication and cross pollination and knowledge transfer to our zones, to our markets, in order for them to be able to come back to us if they see things happening in their field, so that we can coordinate. But that's in itself is a job, because there's so many things happening because of the visibility and the hype around blockchain. The second key learning, and that we apply now to other areas of digital transformation, is the ways of working that I've shown before, and being agile and educating our decision maker on what they can and can't expect from this experiment phase, and focus initially on low-hanging fruits, easy application of this technology to prove the value, and then get pull from a bottom-up pull, because that makes it a lot easier to then deploy at scale and impact the business. The third point is, and that's something that didn't exist really in that shape before I arrived at Nestle, but it's very much thinking that IT are not just a cost, but IT are collaborators of operation, in that we should work in a box to deploy this technology, because everything we're looking at nowadays have got some sort of an aspect of information technology. We don't want to do shadow IT, and we don't want to push things on IT that would take them a long time to prove from a compliance perspective. So working together at the same time on these topics makes it a lot faster to deploy, and makes us a lot more agile as well. The last point is about learning by doing, and that's the first time we've done that, because there's absolutely no application in the food and beverage industry of blockchain before. So it was about putting the resources together and the subject matter expert to understand really where we could test it and how we can deploy, rather than pushing that down onto them. It's working with the expert, the people who know how the processes work now, and seeing how blockchain would impact, or how new technology would impact their work and make it better, for them to take ownership of that as the functional leads, and utilize the technology in their own function. And the last one, the data governance. Blockchain brings about, as I said, unprecedented transparency about what we do. And there's still a lot of questioning internally about how much transparent we can and we need to be for consumers, And as we were embarking on the blockchain for good phase, I've shown before on this pillar using blockchain for sustainability, we've chosen to go beyond the normal, business to business permission blockchain, which is private, where people have to be invited to participate. For this one, we've chosen to go to a public blockchain solution, which means that everything uploaded related to one of our supply chain on this solution is visible by everyone that has got an internet connection. So this brings about a lot of risk, a lot of rewards as well by being the first mover in that field and being fully transparent about this supply chain. But it's mitigating the risk and reward and really focusing the application on where we can leverage this. So the journey has been going on for about 18 months, 2 years now actually. So we started in 2017. The first time we heard about blockchain in Nestle is when we joined the IBM Food Trust Consortium, all the way to today and end of October 2019, where we're going to take decision for the future of the work we've been doing. Now we've proven what blockchain can do in terms of transparency and consumer trust, in terms of process efficiency and process improvements, and in terms of sustainability, is deciding where we take our big bets for the future and where we deploy at scale blockchain. But one of the message of this slide as well is that the orange dots are about when we interacted with board member in the group to make decision or to share information about the work we were doing. And the message that we kept it very flexible. There was no 6-month cycle in terms of going back to them with conclusion and working on on strategy at a given point, etc. You can see that we started in 2017. The direction was test IBM Food Trust as a solution for consumer trust and come back to us when you have something to demonstrate and when you have a better idea of what we can do with this solution. And it took us about 13 months to do that. So that's the second time we had an interaction. And there we interacted with the customer as well. So we had a top stop with the customer, and that's where we decided, on the meeting to launch a collaboration with that customer that resulted in the first launch product traced by blockchain from Nestle in France. And then there was a very short turnaround to work on the strategy for 2019. And then again, a very short turnaround when we look at blockchain, and we thought blockchain, we can use blockchain for sustainability and to back our sustainability claim and make the business even more honest than it is now. And so that's why in January we pitched to the boards and the responsible sourcing team in order to launch a project, which is the one I mentioned, about utilizing public blockchain rather than private to track some of our key commodities. But then since, up until today, we haven't had any other interaction with board members. It's just when we need to take the key decision, we're going to go to them in October and say, these are the lessons learned from the last 9 months, and this is what we recommend going further. So going forward. So it was very flexible, and I think this is how we succeeded working very fast and deploying something from scratch in 2017 to something that is permeating through all Nestle businesses and function in October 2019 by keeping this flexibility, agility, and by having a very understanding set of stakeholders and governing body. So with that, I'll stop here because we don't know what the key decision for 2020 will be, so I can't reveal them. But I'm happy to take questions now.
Ben, thank you very much indeed. I think that was absolutely fantastic, and it's a very important time coming up for you in terms of making those decisions on a lot of hard work over recent years. We've got a raft of questions coming in, so if you're happy to take some of those, that will be fantastic. Just as you're gathering your thoughts on that, I just wondered if I could just ask you how Nestle actually has dealt with some of the ambiguity around some of these issues. You mentioned about you're not exactly sure what the outcome would be, about the span of the supply chain now actually moving into partnership rather than being in a supplier situation. In a sense, the board is taking some of the risks. How as an organization have you dealt with some of that ambiguity which comes with these technologies, because you don't know exactly where they're going to be in the future, and they could hold great opportunities, they could hold maybe some risks. And I just wondered if you could speak a little bit just to how, from a cultural point of view, that you've actually dealt with those within Nestle.
I think communication was a key point, and having people understand what was possible with the technology. But the main aspect is to start with very small set of experimentation, very clear hypothesis we wanted to test, and as we go along, building that knowledge and having an open channel. And as I said, not a set one. It wasn't about meeting up and having meeting with tens of people to discuss what we could do, but open ad hoc channel to sort of disseminate the knowledge we were learning as we were doing the experimentation. It was about collaborating. The collaboration aspect was actually a byproduct and a very positive but surprising aspect when we saw people that we would not expect to be open to collaboration with us starting to ask us to work on project together for consumers. So that was actually it wasn't intentional. It just came because the technology asked to develop this network, and not having silos of data and silos of people working in their corner. So it came naturally like this. But the uncertainty about the technology, as I said, is about starting small, and some of them have failed, and some of them are still unproven. When you talk about smart contracting, for instance, the key issue, and that's not going to be accepted until it's resolved, is that a smart contract, which is basically the translation of a physical business contract between two trading parties, converting that into a code is not accepted in a court of law, and that's not going to move until that happens, or you can find a hybrid solution. So there are clear roadblocks that we still have to remove. But I think people were quite patient because they were understanding that we were building knowledge and there was potential behind.
Yeah, thank you for that. So as I said, we got quite a few questions that have come in. I will try and go through as many of these as possible. I'll just take one and I'll try and answer it actually, which was actually, are we covering in the webcast here blockchain's impact on traditional institutions like banking and legal? That's not something that we're going to focus on today. We decided just to kind of focus in one area to illustrate, in this instance, looking at food and consumer goods. But there are huge impacts of blockchain potentially in the financial markets in particular. I know fintechs that are looking to actually change share certificates into tokenization so they can be more freely traded, and many things like that. So huge potential implications in other areas as well in terms of legal, but the intention is not to cover those today because it's just so vast. So we wanted to try and focus it on food. So just answering that question. The second, Ben, I don't know if you would want to have a view on this, but one of the questions is that cyber hacking is becoming ever more sophisticated, and what confidence do you have that the blockchain you're putting in place is something that is secure and can't be hacked? Is that something that you've looked at?
Yes, I mean at the moment what we're using with Food Trust in particular, because it's still a growing platform, And I suppose the security, the cyber security around blockchain come with scales, because the more nodes, so the more participants you have to hire, the more difficult it becomes at this point of time. So at the moment, we know it's not 100% secure, but I don't think any of the database and the current solution we're using are 100% secure. So it's accepting this little risk. Where it becomes a little bit more critical is when you don't have to hack just the nodes, but you can decrypt the information without the sort of public and private key type of mechanism. Look, people are talking about having quantum secure blockchain and all this sort of adding buzzword to already a buzzing technology. We know it's not 100% secure. I think for us, it works the way we intend to, and it doesn't add incremental risk on what we already have. So that's why we accepted the risk of the technology we have today. So I suppose we accept the risk that blockchain can be potentially hacked, although it's probably a lot more difficult than a normal database, a centralized database. But we accept that there is a risk for that.
Yeah. So I suppose as in any business decision, that there's a degree of risk, and therefore you have to understand and ascertain what those might be, but make a judgment on the potential size of those risks and take them forward. We do have another question which is actually related to that, which is around how visible is your company's data that is shared over this distributed ledger, and do you have concerns about the sensitivity? I suppose this partly just reflects on what you just said, doesn't it, in terms of actually being aware of the risks? Is that how you would understand that particular issue in terms of data sensitivity and transparency?
Yes, and this is why we've chosen as a central backbone to work with IBM on their food trust solution. First of all, IBM has got the history and the credibility in the IT world developing solutions like this. Second, their solution is a permission solution. So it means that we still retain control on data exposition. So we can say who can see what of the data we upload, and the other participant can do that as well. So we are not exposing all the data to everyone. So we still retain that control, and so this is fine from a corporate compliance perspective. The second solution we're using, which is the one for sustainability, is however completely different, because everything that is on the solution is visible. So we have to sort of decide beforehand with the suppliers and the retailers and ourselves for this solution what we want to upload before we upload, because once it's there and it's visible for everyone. So this one is a lot more powerful from a consumer and a public perception, because it's full disclosure, but we have to be very careful and very strict with what we put on this solution.
Thank you. Yeah, and that's one of the issues here on another question we have here, which is really around kind of governance and the ways of looking at this. The question from the individual here on the webcast is really around that the company that they're in has created several digital innovation centers, one for marketing, for example, one for operations, one for supply chain, and it asks what are the other governance solutions and designs that you're seeing out there. I mean, I think one of the things that I would mention to that is that I know a big European bank, for example, has got those different governance going issues dealing with the digitization of their business, but they bring it all back together in one committee that tries to join the dots between them. The CEO of that particular organization says it's his most exciting meeting of the entire month, which is what are they doing around technology and how they're governing it. It's because it's so important to them. But I don't know if you wanted to add anything to that, Ben, in terms of the way that you try and wrap your arms around all the different technology issues that are going across the digital transformation of Nestlé. Is there anything you'd want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, we've got exactly the same sort of problem and opportunities, I suppose for me, it's to create. We know we have silos of innovation. It's about creating a community so people work. They can be on marketing, they can be on supply chain also, but they have the same interest. So it's creating this community to work together and going back to their own purpose when need is. But is to not try to stop a particular organization from doing it, but working as a community to deliver.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I couldn't agree more. I think the big change and the big challenge, I think, for organizations is creating those communities which haven't necessarily existed in the past, but because we have these new technologies and the changes that they're making to business models and the organization, is that you do have to create the community and kind of create and bring different people with different expertise and viewpoints into those communities in order to get the best solution. I think that's organizationally is kind of a challenge, and it's you can't start too soon, I would say. I don't know if you've got any views on that, Ben.
But it's just not to so the top down is very important. It's key because there are things that we might not be aware of, etc. But the bottom up is not to steal for innovation, because I think and sometimes when you're sitting in a central organization or the center of an organization that is very decentralized like Nestle, you don't want to be seen as the person always saying no because it doesn't fit with what you're doing. So the bottom-up coordination that's what I've said as one of the lesson learned is to master this bottom-up innovation, and we still we're not there yet, but it's to incentivize people to come to you and work with you rather than work in isolation. That's for me would make a lot more impact than just doing top down.
Yeah, and I suppose one of the challenges of digital is that will you ever be there? Actually, that the pace of technology is moving so quickly that actually trying to grasp the prize and get to the final state is almost impossible because the technology is moving forward. But the more important bit is actually that you've got the communities to try and deal with those challenges and opportunities that are being created by digital, and that's the real issue, isn't it? Not getting to the end game, but actually creating with the organization communities to deal with those issues.
And the thing with digital technology is that it's not hard to try and do a small experimentation. So because it's dematerialized, so it's not like you have to go to a factory and do something physical. It's a very easy thing to do. So people tend to do it and then see what happens. So that's why you've got so much bottom up versus top down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for those questions. So we've had quite a few questions there. What I'll do is start to draw the webcast to a close because we're getting towards the top of the hour. Thank you for your attention. I just wanted to draw your attention to a couple of related peer networks that we have at Conference Board, the Corporate Governance Council and Chief Auditors, but we also have other councils as well, like Innovation, that are dealing with these digital challenges. So if you want to find out more, obviously you can find more at our website. And before we close, obviously we hope that you've enjoyed today, that you found some of the issues that we've surfaced are very pertinent to what you're trying to do in your own organization, and that the insights that we've discussed today have been useful for you and commercially insightful. I want to just close by saying a very, very big thank you to our guest today, Ben Dubois from Nestle. A fantastic presentation, hugely insightful, and I think very brave in terms of actually talking about some of the issues which are facing big companies. I think it's been a fantastic insight into what Nestle is doing, and thank you very much indeed for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Chris.
So thank you for everybody else who's joined the webcast today. It's been our pleasure to host it. We hope, as I said, you found it useful. Please do complete the webcast evaluation before you leave, which is on the screen now. We very much appreciate that, just to get some feedback on where it is, and hope that you enjoy the rest of the day and that you join us on another webcast from the Conference Board